Blog number 71, Dining Out Ataxian-Style. Have you ever heard someone use the expression, "It's right there, it's right on the tip of my tongue"? I think most people have heard or used this phrase before, but if you haven't, it's just a simple way to convey that either you have a thought that you can't quite formulate, or that you're having a hard time coming up with the correct words to describe or explain something. This kind of situation happens to me quite a bit, actually, and often it feels as if someone is dangling a thought or a phrase, the exact one that I'm currently looking for, just out of my reach, as if I were a circus animal and they wanted me to sit up and beg for an audience. But what usually happens is that the very minute that I stop trying so hard to pull the thought into my grasp, it will simply just appear before me. All I have to do now is reach out and take it, although with an SCA, I will have to grasp at the thought a few times before I can actually wrap my mind's clumsy and somewhat wooden fingers around it and obtain that firm hold. However, grasp it, I finally do. And experience has shown me that once I have maintained a solid grip on a thought, I then need to clutch it in a strong stranglehold, and I need to write it down or say it as quickly as I can. Sometimes it feels as if I only have minutes before the thought will squirm itself out of my embrace. It'll spring off my tongue where I originally found it and slip off into the night, never to be heard or seen again. Recently, however, I have been able to throttle a few thoughts into my grip about my personal experiences with dining out, and I would like to share them with you. When it comes to eating a meal in a restaurant, fine dining, casual, or fast food, I've been pondering on the importance of the proper attire. Now, I knew that there had to be a connection between the choice of color and style of clothing worn out to eat, and that of the restaurant that becomes the final selected place to dine. But the thought just kept eluding me. I knew it was there, but it continued to dangle and swing seductively just beyond my grasp. Until, that is, the most recent time that I found myself having a meal in the restaurant. Because after looking at all the carnage that I had left on the table and all the food that I had spilled on myself by the end of the meal, the thought finally edged close enough for me just to grab it. It finally dawned on me that I should be ordering my meal based completely and solely on the color of my clothing. An example of this kind of system would be to only order, say, the guacamole burger when I'm wearing a green shirt. This way I can walk out of the establishment with my head held high and not resembling someone who just engaged in a high-intensity food fight. Of course, I could just always wear neutral-colored clothing when eating out, but this would mean that I would have to stick to water, and spilling this in my lap may lead others to land on undesirable conclusions once I stand up to try and exit the building. Portion sizes, when this is an option, I have discovered to also be an important part or a consideration when ordering a meal in a restaurant. If I am hungry, which still happens to be continuing on quite a regular basis, then I find that I need to order enough so that the food can evenly be distributed onto the table, the floor, my clothing, and yet still provide enough to actually eat. Besides obvious reasons, like my age, I wouldn't order a kid's meal if I was actually planning on getting something to eat. I do, however, wish that they would include a really cool toy with the larger orders. I mean, this seems like discrimination to me. That's a subject for a later time. Sometimes I've wondered if it wouldn't be simpler just to order an empty plate, sit in the booth for about 20 minutes, tip the waiter, and then go home. Or maybe one of those Willy Wonka sticks of gum that offer a full course meal. A close connection to the choice of portion size is the utensils that you select. I will always choose this chopstick. Well, as long as the chopstick is rounded on one end and can be used with a hand, like with one of those hand as a scoop, and well, pretty much it resembles a spoon in every way. So by this definition of the chopstick, I guess you could say that I always choose the spoon when given the option. I do this for several reasons. One of which is because the spoon permits me to carry a larger payload to my mouth, allowing at the same time for a certain percentage of food to fall off on its upward journey. Also, because the fork has sharp prongs that become potential WOMDs, or weapons of my destruction, with each bite that I attempt to take. I have also been known to fling forkfuls of food onto the floor while attempting to cut it into mouth-sized portions. I end up applying so much pressure to cutting that when the fork severs the piece that I am cutting, my hand doesn't stop and I launch the food into space. Hey, this would be a neat trick if it was intentional. Like when someone throws food up in the air and then catches it in their mouth. Yeah, I could actually do this if the object was not to catch the food in my mouth, but to hit myself in the eye, the forehead, or the throat. When this cutting and flinging occurs at home, my dogs are really the only ones who benefit. This phenomenon also manifests itself when I try to scoop ice cream, only this is known as the scoop and toss. It's kind of the ataxia version of a game that I used to play as a kid with little square bean bags called toss-across. So eating is just one more of the areas that has been affected by the presence of spinocerebellar ataxia, but one in which, like everything else about this disease in my life, can be dealt with through a little bit of creativity, imagination, humor, and a will not to give up or to give in.